Hey, welcome to The Vinyl Verdict, and I just wanted to do a short video talking about the One-to-One documentary with John and Yoko that's in theaters right now. I had the chance to see it, and as a big John Lennon Beatles fan, I thought it'd be worth capturing my thoughts here. I think most of the internet has already shared that. I did just want to see most of the concert, and this movie is not that. It does show a lot of footage of John Lennon and Yoko being backed by Elephant's Memory in that August 1972 performance, but you don't really get the full songs. You get interspersed newsreels and footage of the time telling a story, which is obviously it's a documentary, so there's an important story there of the political climate and John Lennon's position in that time, having just kind of moved to New York before he was in the security of the Dakota. But at the same time, as a music fan, you're left kind of wanting a little bit more, I think, in terms of those performances. Still, there's a lot of footage we've never seen before, a lot of audio tapes that were particularly interesting too that I was going to call out. So it's very cool to see, and I believe it's rumored, if not confirmed, that we're going to get a full one-to-one concert box set and documentary at the end of the year. So I think this is giving us a taste of that, and there's hopefully much more to come. So yeah, as I said, not really a whole narrative around this. The exposition comes in the form of kind of changing the station on the TV, select interviews with John Lennon through, again, those news stations showing you what's happening in the world. It's a little better than like the talking heads thing, which has gotten a bit old, but there's some cards that come up that show you a little bit about what's happening, but for the most part, you kind of have to know the overall story. And it's cool, John Lennon is not in every scene. He kind of pops up here and there and flickers, and you can see how embedded he is in the news cycle living in New York at that time. But I think almost the first 10 minutes of the film have very little of John. It's more about news coverage of the time and what's happening in the world. And then he shows up in an interview. I don't know if it was Dick Cavett or something. So Mike Douglas, he's on these different shows. He's doing radio interviews, etc. So it's kind of showing the chaos of New York City in 1971, 1972. It opens with the New York City song, Come Together. Man, that's a great performance. The only real Beatles song that he performs, and that's the first one, or the second one that you hear in the documentary. Abbey Road is just 3 years before this, and his look is completely different, right? He's no longer this preacher with the full beard and everything, but kind of an army jacket, rocker, rebellious type. And his vocals are really in top form again. Around this time, there's a very interesting phone call between John Lennon and Alan Klein, and I haven't heard much of Alan Klein's voice ever, so it was kind of interesting to see their dynamic, and especially because Alan Klein did have a little bit of that father figure dynamic where he's telling John not to play Attica State at the concert and just play John Sinclair, and John Lennon seems a bit almost confused about this, like why not? What would be the reason I wouldn't play Attica State? What's controversial about that? So I just found it interesting that he's known to have guided the Beatles and other bands on Apple at the time in directions about what music to put out and not put out and in what markets, but it was interesting to hear him so directly vetoing something a Beatle wanted to do at this time. Also interesting to me is, I've read about it, but how much on some of these tapes John Lennon talks about wanting to tour, that he wants to do this Free the People tour and go city to city, and it's a little bit of the crazy big picture John Lennon idea, the vision of liberating people from jail and paying the bail with the amount you make from each. So how much is he actually excited about the idea of performing on stage versus the idea of this movement? That's a little bit unclear, but it seems pretty genuine, and he wants to get Dylan and all of that. And that only falls apart when there's a falling out with him and Jerry Rubin over kind of the non-violence versus violence aspect of performing or protesting outside the Republican convention in Miami. Yeah, there's interesting tape recordings again of John Lennon knowing he's bugged. This only came to light, I think, with that John Lennon vs. US documentary in 2006, but now it's really confirmed. You hear the phone picking up and hanging up, and so that's pretty cool. The rumors that he's going to disrupt the Republican convention, and that's why they are bugging his phone line and kind of eavesdropping on everything. Well, that's kind of true, not to get political, but I mean, his plan was to disrupt the Republican convention. He was not going to do it in a violent way, and that's, again, why that falling out occurred. But I do think it's kind of interesting that, the conspiracy theory was right that they were watching him, but they were also right that they had a reason to watch him, and they both kind of knew that the other party was doing this, so fascinating. I think, again, though, I don't like the way, it's a good narrative, I don't like the way this is disrupting the music. I mean, Hound Dog, that's John Lennon paying an homage to Elvis Presley and just doing it very well. And so, I don't know, pictures of Nixon winning the re-election campaign, like, I get it, it's a documentary, it's telling a story, but the rewatchability just drops for me. If it was just John Lennon playing the song, I'd watch this over and over and over again. I don't know that I want the clip show of 1972 every time I hear that song. I would say the performance of Mother is worth the price of admission alone. It is uninterrupted, so you get the full song, amazing restored quality. I think it's one of the best performances he ever gave. I just forget just vocally how fragile and everything that song is. There's just really drums and vocal with the piano chord kind of fading out as he's doing these runs with his voice that John Lennon did not perform that way, right? He's chewing gum, he's so nervous, he's usually singing kind of rough, and in many cases he does just abbreviate some of those melodies, but with Mother you can just tell he's putting all of his heart and soul into that performance, and I don't think he really performed it ever again outside of that concert. So it's a really fascinating a cappella, vulnerable performance from John Lennon to the however many thousand people in the crowd with really intentional melodies and twisting it. And I actually thought that was the standout moment of the whole concert. So there's also some rehearsal footage in here that I thought was really cool. I didn't know that had ever been taped. It's just very small snippets, but it gives me hope that maybe one day that could be released in a longer format of John Lennon showing up at the venue early and maybe a little bit of banter and his personality at that time. There's also the jokes, the phone calls from May Pang about trying to order the flies for the short film that John and Yoko are making. That's pretty comical. I know I heard a podcast with the creators of the film saying that was like their humor and levity that they were able to keep introducing, because there's a lot of heavy stuff in this movie, and I did find myself kind of laughing out loud at a couple of those requests. So yeah, that was really well done. But overall, that's the one-to-one documentary. I think it's cool to have a little bit of a focus on that period of 1972. It's probably it wasn't just the FBI bugging John Lennon, but overall he was on a lot of cameras and TV shows and performances. It's probably the most documented period of his solo career, and so I'm glad that it's getting all this attention, and I hope there's more to come at the end of this year. So definitely check out the one-on-one documentary, and I'll put the link in the description here. I think I believe it's coming to Blu-ray very soon, and I saw Max was involved, so hopefully they're going to distribute this on HBO Max as well. Also, Brad Pitt was involved. I saw his name in the credits. Anybody know the story with that? Okay, thanks for watching.